prospects for India's wildlife then seemed. I'd come back to India 40-odd years later as a writer, not a hunter, still fascinated by those forests, but now drawn to tigerwalas, the handful of men whose mission was to restore the tiger's world to something like what it once had been. And so, over the months and years that followed that first visit to Nagarhole, I kept track of Ullas. I visited Karnataka twice on assignment to report what he and the extraordinary band of volunteers he'd gathered around him were doing, and I met with him over single malt whiskey at my New York home twice a year when he visited the Bronx Zoo headquarters of the Wildlife Conservation Society, whose India program he headed. Among tigers is his lively personal chronicle of the years during which he became what his mentor George Schaller has called him, the best tiger biologist in the world. The ingenious methods of monitoring animal population densities he and his colleagues developed, incorporating camera traps, line transect sampling, and occupancy modeling, all clearly explained here, are now employed in tiger range countries throughout Asia. Simultaneously, Ullas also became one of India's most effective conservationists. He and his fellow citizens have used their constitutional rights to legally fight for the diversion of roads through protected areas, and closure of a vast strip mine that was ripping apart Kudremukh National Park in the heart of the biodiverse Western Ghats. They also developed a model voluntary resettlement plan which, without pressure or intimidation, has persuaded some 2,000 families to leave prime tiger habitats and begin new and better lives beyond their borders. The obstacles Ullas overcame accomplishing all this are nearly as extraordinary as the accomplishments themselves. A mob burned his Suzuki and destroyed his field camp in Nagarhole. He'd been taken to court too many times to count. Ullas, who has never suffered fools gladly, has sadly had to deal with more than his share of them. Tabloid journalists willing to distort facts about his work to sell papers, forest ministers who knew nothing about the forests in their charge, venal local officials more interested in siphoning off funds than saving wildlife, central government officials who stubbornly refused to consider fresh approaches to long-standing problems, international organizations that lavish funds with little understanding of how they will be used or misused, and living-room conservationists more interested in the fate of individual tigers, even if they killed people, than in the survival of the species as a whole. Through it all, he has remained an optimist, committed to his cause, convinced that, if properly defended and managed, India's forests can potentially hold 10 to 15,000 tigers, 3 to 5 times the current estimate of around 3,000. When he and I first became friends, all those years ago, neither of us had grandchildren. He now has 2. I have 4. If, in the distant future, our grandchildren's grandchildren are still able to see tigers in the wild, it will be in no small measure because Ullas Karanth never backed down from a fight, never stopped seeking to understand the beautiful, elusive animals he says he is hardwired to understand and defend. Jeffrey C. Ward is an American historian and the writer of television documentaries including the Civil War and the Vietnam War in 19 books, including, with his wife Diane Rains Ward, Tigerwalas, Saving the Greatest of the Great Cats. Preface. I first started working on an early version of this book in the year 2000, during a rare sabbatical at Columbia University provided by my employer, the Wildlife Conservation Society, WCS, in New York. However, soon after, my mandate to conduct wildlife research and real-world conservation, both at the same time, gave me no time to finish the manuscript. While the book was important, it never seemed as urgent as the crisis on hand. The manuscript languished in various forms until 2019, when my responsibilities to the WCS ceased. Luckily, at that point in time, I met Jane Distel, whose enthusiasm as a literary agent is exceeded only by her passion for tigers. Encouraged